In this edition of the Real Sales Manager podcast, it was a great pleasure to discuss with Rebecca Hatch her unique personal experience of moving from being a pure engineer into sales and then into various leadership positions within the professional lighting industry. Currently Director of Digital Urban Solutions at FM Conway, Rebecca's vast experience covers both consulting and contracting, and she has immersed herself in her client's industry by being a founder of the Young Lighting Professionals, that's the YLP, and also as a past president of the UK's Institute of Lighting Professionals. We touch on a wide range of topics, obviously including moving from an engineering into sales and what her background meant to her as she moved into different leadership positions, as well as the impact of investing in gaining an MBA. She emphasises the importance of relationship building, honesty and effective communication in both sales and management, and throughout the conversation she highlights the dual roles that professionals, especially engineers, must embrace in today's business environment. She also emphasises the importance of collaboration between sales and engineering teams, the need for strategic long-term planning, and the value of industry involvement for personal and professional growth. It was a hugely enjoyable discussion with Rebecca, providing an interesting and thought-provoking perspective on sales management today. Rebecca, thanks ever so much for coming onto the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Your background is a little different to some of the people that we interview, but I know you've got some great insights. So can I just start, standard question, could you just tell us a little bit about your journey, how you ended up in sales, in a leadership position? So what's it been for you?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, definitely a bit of a unique journey, and often wouldn't think of myself in a sales role. Definitely not now, but we'll get into that a little bit more. I'm a lighting engineer by trade. I've spent the last 21 years in the lighting industry, and when I say the lighting industry, I mean mainly in the exterior infrastructure space, dealing with highways, transportation, infrastructure projects. The first 10 or so years of my career were a very traditional sort of linear engineering career route, moving through from being a junior technician, it was called, was my first job title, sort of an unofficial apprenticeship back then, moving through the engineering ranks to become a principal engineer, which is when I sort of thought about what's my next step, and it's then I chose to move into a more commercial role. I've always been interested in business, had always just really enjoyed the client facing parts of the role, even as an early design engineer. You always got, if you had any opportunity to sit with a client and talk through the design or the problems, I really enjoyed that element. And it was only when I did a bit of an early sort of personality questionnaire, sort of through as part of a learning and development process, that it actually said sales was a natural fit for me, and I've never thought of it before, but I did know I wanted to do something more in the business side of what we were doing in our industry, which I'd never had the opportunity to. So decided to join a lighting manufacturer and have my sort of first experience of out and out sales, actually selling a product to the same clients I'd been designing or advising as an engineer.
Right.
Became the commercial director of that business, leading a sales and marketing team over a few years. And went and got myself qualified in what I thought was necessary to back up my sort of natural flair for those kinds of roles by doing a MBA, and just generally learning different sales techniques from others, and just putting into practice. I think what I felt was just natural conversation, turning that into a sales process.
Right. Uh, when you talk about natural flair, what are the components of that in your view? Because you know you've experienced developing into it. You're working with customer-facing people all the time. What are the components of that go into making a natural salesperson in your view?
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's definitely my view. But I think, you know, it sounds obvious, but just relationship building. You know, open communication. Being helpful, being amenable, talk. You know, we're all human at the end of the day. And you know, I truly believe in any capacity, sales or not. You know, people buy from people, and people like to deal with people, and we see that, don't we? We see that as you know, I've changed. I'm now in a very different role, which we'll come back to. But when you've stayed within the same industry as I have for this many years, you know, it's still the same people, the same clients, whether you're selling them a product, designing something for them, building something for them. So for me, it's that ability to engage, to communicate clearly, and to have it as a two-way, you know, a two-way conversation. I think it's never for me been about a transactional sales relationship. You know, you spend that time getting to know those people. That's part of the process, and I think being able to do that in a natural, unforced way is what I mean. And also, I've just never had any problem, as you can tell, just talking to people.
Okay.
Half the issue.
I mean, for me, it's really interesting because, you know, people buy from people is, you know, we've been saying that for years and years, and it kind of went out of fashion. But the last few years has come back because it is about relationships and trust and open communications, as you see. So a lot of that stuff is now we're realizing the importance of it. I think if you look at, you know, what's happening in sales training and stuff like that. Okay, interesting. Sorry, I interrupted the conversation there around how your career's developed.
That's okay. So I spent sort of about 5 years working for a lighting manufacturer. So moving from being in and to be honest, I joined them and went into a sales role. Actually, I looked after an area, traditional sort of geographically split part of the country, to learn about the products and to really understand you know, that process before I went into the commercial director role and then became the managing director of that business. So obviously becoming ultimately responsible for the sales. And it was only when an opportunity to move into a director position back in my consultancy design engineering phase came up a bit out of the blue, that I took that opportunity and went into went sort of back into the engineering space, but as the business unit director. And even though many in an engineering professional services business, you don't often use the word sales, you know, unless we're talking about tracking revenue targets. But I think, you know, regardless of whether you have sales in your job title or your job description, we are all selling all the time, and particularly when you're selling a service, you know, when that's all you have to offer, your people are your only product. So important that to be the best for our clients as engineers and as a professional services firm, that we're conscious of those sales tools and those same attributes that we just talked about. You know, being open and honest, understanding your client's need, and I purposely structured our team within the consultancy to have both dual growth and technical expertise hats on for the majority of the leadership, so that they had that accountability for doing both. And it's quite an uncomfortable concept for some of the more traditional engineers. Okay, but as you said, with, you know, times have changed. Everybody's got dual roles or multiple roles. You don't often have the luxury of specialising in just doing one thing these days. And I think, whether you call it sales or you call it business development, you call it client liaison, whatever the title is, you know, it's vital that everybody understands how to go about getting the best from your clients and deliver for your clients.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's really interesting. So your career is you've interwoven this really solid engineering background with sales expertise, with general management and leadership expertise, and you've been going backwards and forwards a little bit all the time. And I use the word intertwine. So you've got this fairly unique perspective there. Well, I asked you earlier about what do you think the components of selling are. What if I asked the same question about management and leadership? What for you are the key attributes, characteristics you look for in, let's say, a first line manager, a customer facing sales manager, which the majority of people listening to or viewing the podcast are going to be aspiring or new sales managers. So from your perspective, what are the key characteristics that you look for in those kind of individuals?
Again, it might sound like an obvious thing, but to me, it's honesty, which you might say integrity if you're writing a set of values or a job description.
Yeah.
But I think, and honesty on all capacity, whether that's internal comms, internal reporting, or with your client, tell them what you're going to do and then do that.
Okay.
If things change, which they always do, there's external factors outside of your control, but just be honest and just, deliver on what you said. I don't know, there's lots of cliches you can pull out. Under promise, over deliver, all of those things. But I genuinely think, you don't build that trust and build those relationships that we were talking about if you can't be, and sometimes I don't think anybody's intentionally dishonest, I'm not suggesting that, but in the way they communicate, that gets a bit lost. And I think not, and that's the other, I think communication, we can always all be better. And I don't think there is such thing as over communicating, if I'm honest. Maybe in terms of marketing and advertising, but not in terms of management. I think having that clear communication of, so whether that's internally as a manager, managing a team, whatever their job roles might be, of your expectations, being clear, being able to articulate exactly what you expect from them, and equally, I said, forwardly to your clients. It's such an important, and actually many other things can be taught. You can learn other skills, and you can become expert in other areas. But if you cannot clearly communicate and you don't have that want to be upfront about what's really achievable, the rest of it sort of falls away.
I totally get that. I mean, particularly the honesty thing. Did you struggle? So a lot of the conversations I have around honesty, particularly with managers, as a salesperson or an engineer, you're totally honest with the clients. You set expectations in the correct manner. Well, when you get into leadership, there are some things that you can't communicate. You're privy to some information about, I don't know, career paths or whatever it is. Did you struggle with that? Because a lot of young, new managers do. They're part of the management team, so they can't just be totally honest. Honest is not the right. They can't be totally open.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you cope with that?
I think that whilst there are elements you may be privy to, or things that actually aren't beneficial to share, you can still communicate, and then those employees won't feel like something's being kept from them or hidden, or they're not in the know. A lot of feedback you get from employee surveys, and I'm a big fan of using things like Net Promoter Score to test the temperature of your team or your business. But a lot of the feedback is just that I don't know what's going on kind of messaging. So I think the managers that feel nervous to share anything because don't know what they're allowed to say, it creates more of an issue than saying, look, I can't go through that with you right now, or I can't share all the details, but it is being reviewed, or this is in hand, or I have heard you. Often the response is or the initial reaction is to not respond, or to just say nothing, which creates a worse, for me, in my experience, has created a worse culture. And we're generalising a bit there, because obviously some people quite happily carry on and don't don't need that input. Whereas those people,
Yeah.
those members of your team who you know like that regular comms,
Right.
just tell them what you can tell them.
Yeah. And it sounds like, again, being very open and honest with them and saying, look, I can't go into this because it's not decided or it's private or whatever,
Yeah.
but this is what I can tell you.
Yeah, not saying anything is worse sometimes.
Right.
I found.
Yes. Yeah, no, I get that. And I can think of situations where myself in leadership positions haven't, because you're not sure. Yeah, I don't know which way this is going to go. There's a temptation to say nothing, whereas keep that comms going somehow.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I go back to developing into leadership? You took an MBA. Well, why did you do that, and what did you get out of it?
So when coming out of an engineering sort of career path, it's quite regimented. Yes, you can take lots of different routes, and because
Right.
lighting itself is quite a unique element of the engineering field. In that we don't have a dedicated lighting degree, for example. So often people come into the industry from lots of different original routes, and we've got more industry based educational things, but often end up tagging onto a different engineering profession. Like you might go and do an electrical qualification or even architectural, for example. But it's quite regimented. You've got Engineering Council professional registration. So to become, like, I'm an incorporated engineer. Next stage would be a chartered engineer. If you go through that process, it's quite linear. Going into a more commercial role and wanting to progress in the business side, I felt that I didn't want to lose, I suppose, that academic backing. And I think, if I'm really honest, I was a younger female in a quite male dominated space, changing career path. Had quite a few peers and clients saying, "Why are you giving up your engineering?" And I wasn't giving up my engineering. So I looked for what was going to give me that, I suppose, that backing to say I know what I'm doing, and here's my credentials in case that fear of criticism, that was I qualified to be a commercial director or to be in this space. So that was how it started. That was the sort of reason for going and seeking that. It was to give myself that backing. But actually what it gave me was sort of skills and tools that I use all the time. An MBA is broad, as I'm sure you're aware, quite broad qualification where you touch all elements of business. And I love the sort of the people psychology and behavioural aspects. And obviously we did a lot of consumer behaviour and around branding and some of those elements that we covered in that, and coaching techniques and things like that I use every day, and probably not just in my professional life. I think I probably use it in my personal relationships. So it was. I mean, I did it whilst working full time, so it was really tough going.
That's a huge commitment, isn't it? Yeah.
It was, and it was a strain, and it was obviously I was working for the manufacturer I worked for as an SME, so it was all encompassing role as well. We're a small team, and it was really hard going. There was points where I thought, why am I putting myself through this?
I bet.
I do not regret it one bit now, and really glad that I did it.
Okay, because it's, I know people have different views, and I think a lot of people get put off because it's of the commitment. But everybody that has completed, that I've come across, the vast majority are the same as you. There's so much you get out of it. It gives you this much broader perspective on things.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, right, I think we've kind of covered the journey as to how you've got there. Tell me, coming from an engineering background and moving into more of a sales role and a leadership role. So, I mean, the engineering background must give you there's some pros and some cons to that kind of background. What would you point out are the good bits of the background, and does it hold you back at all?
I don't know. I don't think it's held me back. If anything, I think it's helped it's helped me
Yeah.
for sure, because I think in our industry, and I'm sure
Yeah.
we're not unique, those people who use a technical sales approach
Yeah.
tend to outperform. And again, I'm generalizing there.
Okay.
But because our sector is very niche,
Yeah.
specialist is technically backed. You know, we deal with a lot of engineering principles and British standards, and and
Okay.
electrical requirements, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having that engineering or a technical background really does help to be able to not just sympathise, I suppose, with the clients, because you understand the challenges what they're trying to do with
Right.
with or selling them a service or a product.
Yeah.
But I suppose also we've got very fast-paced moving technology now.
Okay.
Since really the invention of LEDs,
Yeah.
lighting has shifted from being a quite I wouldn't say slow, but lamp technology didn't move a huge amount from electric invention. When
Right.
LED,
Okay.
we call it the LED revolution. When LEDs were commercialised and everything moved to electronics, and we now have smart technology and Internet of Things
Yeah.
devices in our lighting. You've got
Yeah.
to keep up with that pace of technology change.
Yeah.
And as just having that, I suppose, having that background knowledge and of knowing how things should work, it enables you to keep up with that.
Right.
So
Okay.
even though I've made a conscious decision, I suppose, to not become a technical expert, I've always kept my hand in, and all my team have always been obviously very actively involved in maintaining that, trialing new innovation and things like that. Having that grounding, having that engineering background allows you to participate in them conversations and to add value to the team or to
Right.
the client, is what I've found.
Okay.
And I think, and on a more crude sort of on a sales front, so because our industry is quite small, those clients that I'm talking to about when I was in a product environment, obviously knew me from my engineering background, and would still talk to me as they would have done when I was a consultant, asking for the same advice.
Okay.
Even though I couldn't obviously give them that in the same capacity, you already had the relationships that you'd built in your engineering roles carried over to then having a sales conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So this for me is quite fascinating, because I mean, you are in a very specialised industry, but it just strikes me there's lots of debates happening more generally now about how technical salespeople need to be, particularly as the rate of change of technology in nearly every industry, is affected by AI, IoT, that kind of stuff, and it appears that most people are going more niche. We're looking at hyper-personalisation of comms and segmentation of markets and stuff like that. So your experience, I think, is really relevant, that other people can learn from as they become more and more niche, as they have to keep up with and hopefully exploit technological change. And what you're saying, I think, is having that technical background enables you to maybe have the context for some of those conversations and keep up.
Yeah, I think so. And that's not suggesting that there is an absolute place and success of those that haven't got that engineering or technical background. But I think also everybody's time becomes tighter, and post-COVID, I think, sales teams are struggling to get in front of clients as much as they maybe used to. Things have, coming back now, but it's quite difficult if you are only engaging over Teams or over virtually to build those relationships. And
For sure.
if all you are able, and I say all as I don't mean it disrespectfully, but if you're only able to have a sales conversation about said product or service and not offer anything else, will those clients make that time for you over someone who could educate you a bit in that session or add value to your solution?
Yeah. No, we're constantly thinking about how, quote, salespeople can really add value in all those conversations. And it's difficult unless you have industry knowledge and technical knowledge as well. And you mentioned there, increasingly we work in sales teams in multifaceted customer facing teams. What would your advice be to managers? I mean, I'm thinking particularly sales managers who are working with engineers as part of their account teams. Are there any particular aspects of the management role that works well with kind of more engineering type people, or doesn't work so well? What's your experience there?
Well, I think historically it was seen as two completely separate roles.
For sure, yeah.
And I remember quite early on in my career being, super eager and super ambitious, and actually being told, that's not your job, there's a bid team for that, or that's not your job, business development, you haven't got any capacity in your, productivity targets to do that.
Yeah.
That kind of, it was always so separate, and it absolutely has merged more. And in those successful teams, it's merged, and you've got people that do have mixed abilities, and I put myself in that bracket. Like I'm not an expert in the engineering space anymore. I'm definitely not an expert in sales, but I sit somewhere in the middle. And I think it's vital, for teams to be successful, to be able to have both and interact between the two. And again, without generalising, but the strengths of the engineers often are very different to the strengths of those in sales or client-facing roles.
Okay, what are they?
And well, but I think just to try and answer your question a bit more directly, what the sales manager needs to do, or both sides just need to appreciate and understand each other's what they bring to the table, and I think that comes down to, again, relationships, so those internal relationships and understanding of each other, and again, I often force my teams into doing things like strength scope assessments or Belbin team role assessments to try and draw some of that out, and often, even though you could maybe write down someone's personality traits just from talking to them seeing it on paper for themselves and being categorised helps them to just be a bit more considerate of each other's viewpoints and understanding. I think the role of the manager or whoever's looking after that collective group is to make sure all those voices are heard and to bring those together. Because I think we said earlier, the engineers will be explicitly honest, very analytical, detail orientated, want everything to be 100% proven and accurate and documented. And the salesperson will say, that'll be fine, let's just get on with it. And again, very generalised there.
But no, it's often true.
Often the push-pull. The salesperson is saying, come on, we need to get this out the door. And the engineer is saying, I'd love to work on this forever to make it perfect. And I talk to my teams about minimum viable product. That we can't make anything perfect. But we need to make sure it's right. And it's also having on that sales side, understanding that what the engineer is raising, is it a nice to have or a must have, and being really clear on what the mandatory requirements, sometimes what are the legal requirements, versus if we spent 5 engineers looked at the same project, they'd have 5 outcomes. How do we differentiate what's necessary and what's nice to have?
Okay, again, so I think there's a lot of general points there that new sales managers in particular can pick up on. So you're saying everybody has some mixed abilities. I get that. But at the end of the day, you don't want everybody being able to do everything. You do want the specializations. But putting effort in, using things like Belbin or whatever we choose, just to think about that mix, think about communications, think about empathy. And again, those are aspects of the management role that people coming into that job for the first time don't always appreciate. That it doesn't happen. Sometimes it happens just by chance, but it's actually a big part of the management role is to make it happen.
I would say that high performing teams are not built accidentally. Bringing exactly what you've just said, bringing that mix of expertise together, but then making sure those roles, the right people are in the right roles for a start, and have those very and having that not clear. I don't like putting, I don't like everything being explicit in a job description and setting necessary boundaries. Because I think they do need to blur, and you do need people to see that, again, multiple hats on, long gone are that's not my job, of many people. But if you don't have those focus areas for people, so you've got 10 people all trying to do the same job and not utilising their best skills or getting the best value out of them. So you do have to put some structure around it. And that's, again, sometimes uncomfortable, or people think that they have skills in a certain area and they don't. It's a huge challenge in showing them that they're better, they're better placed doing a different role sometimes, and then maybe they've been doing for a very long time to get that value from them, and they will be happier as a result, which I've seen, and sometimes it takes a lot longer to convince, and some people don't ever get it. But when it does, that's a real success.
And those are tough conversations to have with people, particularly if it could be a salesperson or it could be an engineer who've been successful and feel comfortable in themselves, but you as the leader have to kind of shift them somehow. That takes some determination. And again, what fascinates me there is what you just said is, you need focus, you need what did you call structure, but at the same time we need to empower people and delegate people, and no, we can't, you can't design it up front, particularly in this changing world, allowing people to figure it out for themselves. So that's really interesting. Rebecca, there's a couple of other aspects I wanted to just touch on, because we've discussed some of this previously. Your attitude towards planning, because when we first spoke, you told me about a 3-year planning cycle. For most sales managers, that concept is totally alien. They're caught in a, what are we doing this quarter, or what are we doing this month? And at best, they do an annual plan. So how do you go about the whole planning process? And because there must be pressure on you to deliver results this quarter, but at the same time, you appear to take a longer term view. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think I actually can't remember the conversation where somebody said to me, a year's not enough. 3 years is often, difficult for people.
Yeah.
18 months is your sweet spot. And
okay.
I'm a very organised person. I like to plan. I'm a list writer. And
right.
we, depending on the business you work for, and as
Sure.
you know, I'm I'm 5 weeks into a new role, which we haven't really explored yet. But even if everybody is held to an annual budget, an annual target. True, and you're right, quarter to quarter, sometimes month to month. That's what you're focused on. But I think, again, that comes down to how the leadership team is structured, those roles within your management layer, to keep those right focuses in the right place. And I think as the leader of a division, a business, a team, it's your job to be looking further ahead than what's being asked of you. I think when we were talking the 3 year, we used to operate a 3 year strategy at my previous company. And when I say a 3 year strategy, it was a very high level plan. It was thinking about setting targets, thinking about the vision for the end of that 3 year period. But then you would still, from an operational delivery perspective, be working to an annual cycle.
Right. Yeah.
And I've just always operated that way. Even in my sort of personal goal setting, thinking about, okay, a year flies by, especially as we go into senior positions. What you can achieve in a year, actually, when you boil that down, it starts to look a little bit light. I think having that 3 year vision of what you want to achieve, and then you put the real meat and the real detail into an annual, sometimes 18 months plan. For me, it just seems to work better, because it allows you to challenge back. I think when you're forced to make short-term decisions within the year, maybe because of a project being cancelled or resource challenge or whatever but a negative external factor. I think sometimes those short-term decisions have longer impact, which you don't have the time to assess, or you're trying to deal with the urgency of that hitting a month figure or hitting a quarter figure. If you've got that 3 year, even if it's a simple 1 page, this is what we're trying to do. It allows you to think about those short-term decisions quickly, to look back at that 3 year and say, is that going to help us towards that, or is that going to really impact on that? Is it really the decision we want to make? And that could be, a forced financial decision. That could be an investment. That could be a strategic recruit. It could be taking on a new client, risk profile. I think you have so many decisions that we've got to sometimes quickly make. It was just, I've always found that helpful to think, to challenge ourselves back and say, is that in line with what we want to do? And it's not to say that 3 year strategy doesn't change over that 3 year period. Markets shift, anything could happen. And no one had COVID in their plan, so it's not to say it's cemented and it forms all decisions, but it's almost like a cheat sheet for yourself to refer back to and say, is this really what we should be doing?
Right. That's really interesting. So that concept of having a high level conceptual, might be just 1 page, but it allows you to make short-term decisions in the right context. Absolutely. Is it taking us in the direction we want to go?
Yeah, and you might not have all the answers to that, and it wouldn't be fully formed as like a business plan or even a strategigic document. Being in this new role, the usual process of trying to write, a 100-day plan or think about what you want to do in those first couple of months. Still, even though I didn't have all the information, I still wrote the 3 year objectives before I started to think about what I wanted to do in these first few months.
No, it's interesting. I get involved in a lot of things like lost sales reports and won sales reports and reviewing account plans, and often challenges or issues that arise are the result of what happened 2 or 3 years ago, where relationships weren't formed, people were let down, pilot programs didn't get seeded and stuff like that, and so we're constantly chasing our tails because we haven't had that longer term view. Okay, that's really interesting. And again, maybe for new sales managers to think, have that vision. You don't have to work the detail you work for the annual plan and maybe even the quarter or whatever. All right, the other thing about your approach which really fascinates me is you do a lot of work kind of outside of your day job with different organizations in the industry, championing different causes. Why do you, apart from being a very nice person, why do you do all that stuff, and what does it give you? And maybe you should just explain to folks, some of the things that you have been involved in.
So I've just we had our AGM for our institution, which is the Institution of Lighting Professionals, only last week, where I actually officially stepped down from the board of trustees after 5 years on the board. I was the process of being part of the board of trustees, unless you're in one other role, you are on the presidential track, and I was president 2 years ago, so I've just finished my year as immediate past president, and then you fall off the board at the end of that. But the Institution of Lighting Professionals, we're a charity in terms of business structure, but we are formed to provide training and education to our members, who are all types of people involved across the lighting industry, whether that's individuals who, as mentioned earlier, want to achieve their professional engineering registration. We provide a membership process to do that, training, education courses, and obviously also corporate company membership to the institution. Right, okay. But I initially got involved, I was new into the industry, and my manager at the time said, go along to this, to learn, really, to go to seminars and lectures to build up your CPD hours and to network. So did that, and I mean, yeah, so we're talking, 20 years ago, and there were hardly any women at all. I mean, we're still sort of 85% male in our sector.
Okay.
But it was so I was part of we had with regional groups as well as it being a national institution. So the London and South East region that I'm part of, there were 2 other women that I knew of in the whole region in the profession. Okay. And also being a younger member of the group, it was quite intimidating. Lots of dark suits and grey hair.
Right. Okay.
But I went along, and actually, me and a colleague, both of us sort of joined our company at the same time. So we went along together, and we started to meet people. Started to ask questions, get more involved, and realised that there've got to be other people who are new into the industry or younger members of our industry. So we formed what's now called the Young Lighting Professionals within the institution.
Okay.
We launched that in 2009. With the 2 of us, formed a small committee, took that to the board at the time to get their support. We had our own budget, we had our own website, created our own events, and really pleased that they're still successfully running and are now sort of 500 members plus, and still run their own events, hold their own annual meetings, and are a firm part of the institution strategy going forward. And so I suppose now the reason I still get involved, I'm obviously very proud of the YLP, the Young Lighting Professionals, but that network that I built over those years, being involved, if it wasn't for the ILP facilitating those events and having that opportunity to meet people, there's no way I would have had the career that I've had. I wouldn't have had the opportunities for the job roles that I got. I truly believe I wouldn't be where I am without that opportunity, because those were the events where you formed those relationships with peers, colleagues over the years, friends over the years, and I've mentioned that the same clients that I've maybe supported in all my roles across that 20-year career. I've met them at those events. Right. So, and now I try and give that back. As immediate past president, you then become the board link back to the YLP, so it was a nice full circle. Okay. And then now I sit as a past president to help the current board to with governance and things like that.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, it just strikes me. So many managers, many leaders, are under pressure, head down. Working incredibly long hours often. You've somehow found the time and the commitment to kind of look outside of your immediate role, to join these organisations, make things happen in them, start new ones up, build relationships, and it's just I think what you've done is something that many managers can just reflect on and think, when they're down in the trenches, as it were, fighting every quarter to do stuff, to maybe just think, actually, I need to be broader. I need to do kind of the kind of things that you've done there.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There are times where your day job has to take priority, and the institution wouldn't run without volunteers, and they do appreciate we are all volunteers with day jobs. But I think you're right, and sometimes you'd be doing things in the evenings, or you'd be travelling on a Sunday to get to an event, or whatever you might be doing, giving up your personal time. But I also have tried to integrate it and not see it as separate, because it's when you're, especially in a sales capacity or in a leadership role, that engagement with those clients, which they are still clients and peers. It might be a recruitment opportunity. It might be an opportunity to advance a project discussion whilst you're at these events. So it's just making sure you're making the best of that time and trying to weave it into the day job.
Okay, well, there's maybe then a question for senior sales leadership or senior general leadership to allow sales leaders, managers to do this, to encourage it, because of the longer term benefits that it's going to have.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, Rebecca, there's some fascinating stuff coming out of this. I'm going to draw this bit to a close. I've got a couple of big questions I'll ask you after this. But can you try and summarise, if you were giving some advice to a new manager, particularly a new sales manager, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would point to them? Hints, tips, whatever. 3 pieces of advice for a new manager, please.
I think any new manager, so whether you're within an existing company and you've gone to a new role, or it's a complete change, I think speaking to everyone you can, and obviously I've just been doing that myself in the last few weeks. Yeah. So I think and as much as it's quite overwhelming, and I've got a book full of notes that I haven't yet reflected on. Speak to everyone and listen. Just take in as much as you can from the lowest grade within your team, your remit, to your superiors, to just really spend that time. And it can be overwhelming, and you're always got that eagerness to want to do something right away. But I think it's so important to, before you act, to really understand what you've gone into, and to not try and address whatever those people are sharing with you in that conversation. Take it all away. And then give yourself time to reflect on that. So real information gathering, and then make your plan. And that could be a plan to deliver on whatever targets you've been set, or whatever the job description said when you took that role, or it could be that you've got some people challenges to overcome, or recruitment gaps to fill. But take it all in first, then make that plan. I think ask the obvious questions as well. Don't be afraid to say, I'm new, I don't know. Play on that card for as long as you can. Bring, and I suppose to realise that you've got that role for a reason. No one gave you that position on a whim. So to own and to be bold about the value you bring, the perspective you bring, that's valuable contribution. And you might be sitting in a room full of people who've been there for a long time, or you think are maybe more superior, or whatever the scenario is. So as long as you do it in a professional manner, challenge as soon as you think something doesn't seem right, or ask those questions. Do it in the right manner, to not cause an offence or anything in those early days. But ask those questions. If it seems obvious but no one's saying it, ask those questions.
Right. That's fascinating, because a lot of new managers are eager. They think they have to kind of earn their spurs or something. The thing that you said there that struck me was, don't address the concerns straight away. Listen to them, question them, don't address them. And I think that's really wise. And then but there is obviously a limit to that. Don't go and seek this feedback and then do nothing with it, or apparently do nothing. And I think that comes back to my early, that if someone gives you the time to share that, even if it's a short follow-up to say, I really appreciate your input, and I'm looking at what we're going to do with the division, or what we're going to do with the team. And then obviously, do set yourself a deadline for when you are gonna act. We're talking weeks here rather than months, I would say. But it's holding back that initial, oh my God, I've got to do something to make change. I try to resist. And presumably, as you were saying earlier, you can communicate, you can set expectations. That's really interesting. I'm not going to be able to do anything for 3 or 4 weeks, but I will get back to you. Rather than just diving in. The other thing you said there, which I thought was really wise, was just to ask that you said the obvious questions. We often talk to account managers about when you take over an account, that's when you can ask all the dumb questions. 6 months into it, you're expected to know that stuff. But use that opportunity. And then the third thing you said was ask those challenging questions. Again, you can do it from a position of, I'm new here, so I don't can't be expected to understand. And as you said, be bold. Sometimes new managers have the imposter syndrome. You know, why am I here? Can I really do the job? But you are. You know, you're there, and be bold. Okay, that is really interesting. Any other final piece of advice? Well, okay.
Yeah, trying to think, because I don't appreciate it. That wasn't 3 tips, was it? That was just one long sentence.
No, I think I can get 3 out of that. It's ask the questions, ask the obvious questions. Don't address the immediate issues and challenge. Okay, listen. What I suggest is we're going to take a very quick break.
Okay.
When we get back, if you're up for it, I'm going to ask you about the biggest mistake you've made as a manager and what you learned from it, because we can all learn from these things.
Bonus question.
Okay, Rebecca, thanks for that. Fascinating so far. One thing that a lot of people learn from is to understand the mistakes that others have made. So you're happy to share, the biggest mistake that you've made, or the biggest learning that you've had as a leader?
Yeah, it's always a question that I think you either love or dread coming up, and there's lots of I suppose people examples that you try to go to, but as soon as I think about failure or a mistake, it takes me right back to something that happened quite early on in my career. I was about 6 or 7 years into my career, and it was a design project, something that I've done hundreds of times. Working in central London, just to give a bit of context, working in central London, and we were designing a lighting project which was going to be wall mounted onto a very historic, architecturally protected building, and I'm sure where a lot of London is a lovely cream buff coloured Portland or York stone, and all of the public lighting is black, and so we'd of course spent months and months liaising with stakeholders, working through the design, and obviously had agreed that the light fittings that were going to go onto the building would be painted a cream colour to match the stone. And you've been meticulous in getting all of the approvals and planning and everything else. And everything was on site. So I wasn't ever, in those roles at that time, I wasn't of a grade where you'd be present during construction. I had a phone call from one of the contractors quite late, not middle of the night, but quite late in the evening. Answered it, and he said to me, "These light fittings are supposed to be black." And your heart sank, and you think, "Oh my God, no, they're not supposed to be black. They're supposed to be cream." The initial was, "How many have you put up? What are you doing? Where are we at in the build?" And you're inside, your heart's racing, and 100 things are going through your mind. We got it resolved. You're thinking, right, quick, could we spray them on site? What can we do? Because obviously, picture the contractors there, all the equipment, the roads closed. They've got all of their labour on site. Things being done. Program's been agreed. You're thinking, what can I do? But we didn't. I managed to stay calm. We had a conversation. He agreed to, stand the guys down, to stop works, and we would send them back to the manufacturer to be, the colour to be changed properly. Let's not do a half job of this just to solve this issue. And it all got resolved. And when I think back on it, I never told my superiors at the time. I dealt with it. We got it sorted, and then I told them retrospectively.
Right.
And I always think about it because, one, I think it was the fact that we had a relationship where he'd pick up the phone and ask me and talk about it.
Right.
He didn't need to. He'd been given an instruction, he'd been delivered some products, and he had a job to do. And he would have been scrutinised and probably challenged the next day. Well, why on earth didn't we finish that project? Or, But he didn't. He did the right thing and picked up the phone and was courteous enough to talk to me. I could have panicked. I could have, it could have started a blame conversation. I could have phoned up, lots of other people, and, it could have been made worse than the actual situation. But we stayed calm, we thought through the options, we got it resolved, nobody was any the wiser until after it was resolved.
Right.
And I think, yeah, it taught me that we are just human. Mistakes get made, but if we remember that we are human in the moment when that mistake is realised, and don't start blaming, and we're sympathetic to each other, we work together to form the solution. Nobody needs to be panicked or stressed, or those repercussions don't always have to. And I know that's a very specific scenario, but I think, and it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes things are far higher risk that need to be escalated immediately.
Sure.
And I'm not suggesting that things should be kept from your superiors. I tell all of my team to tell me before things happen. But in that scenario, staying calm and finding a solution, and then going to the client as well as my superiors with we have a plan, was obviously a much better conversation and end result than calling and alerting everybody and causing any of that panic. And I think if that happened today, that wouldn't have been a phone call. That would have been an email with probably 20 people copied in, because that's what seems to happen these days. We've forgotten that picking up the phone and talking to each other, human to human, resolves the problem. You can almost guarantee that's what would have happened, because everybody is worried about risk, worried about blame, and we've lost that. And again, I'm generalising, but we've lost that. Just pick up the phone and have a conversation, and you'll probably get there quicker. You send an email, you've got misinterpreted, you've got wording, you've got communication, you've got people that don't need to worry about it, stressing. They also come up with solutions. Whereas actually, in hindsight, even though I was quite early in my career and probably shouldn't have been making those calls, if I'm honest, and wouldn't want my team to do that now, we still had the best result in the end because we did it together.
That, again, that's really interesting, and there's a couple of things you said there that just struck me. So you had the relationship with the individual who was on site, and those relationships, again, don't come about by accident. You'd obviously worked on that so that he felt able to call you out of hours. And the other thing is, you didn't panic. And that doesn't come about by accident either. You'd obviously, develop yourself so that you could take these things in your stride. There was a podcast episode a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about when issues arise, don't go to your boss saying we've got a problem, go saying we've got a problem and here's my plan to fix it. And that came shining through to me as well. What a super story. And I think there is a message there for managers and leaders at all levels around the culture we create, because in lots and lots of organisations, today it would be email with 20 people CC'd, and it's managing the blame matrix and all that kind of stuff, which is just not helpful. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes the clients insist on things like that, but the more we can do to promote a culture where issues get resolved in this manner, appears to me to be very, very healthy.
Yeah, and I think having a clear understanding with your team about what constitutes an issue that needs escalation and what doesn't. And that takes time. There's no one size fits all, and you can't write that down. That's hard to define. You have to work on that and have examples where they come to you with something and you say, what would you do? And let them, and do that, use those coaching techniques to make sure you're comfortable. They will make those right decisions, but you don't grow that autonomy if you don't let them deal with those things. You want to be copied in on everything. They feel like they have to report to you all the time. But then it's getting that balance when something is necessary. And I often say to my team, you'll know yourself if you have a feeling that something's not right or something's risky. That's when you come to me, and I'll tell you if you were going to make the right call or not. But as soon as you have that sense that something's not right, it probably isn't. So that's when
you can smell these things sometimes. It's not you allowing people to use their intuition, not 100%, but if it doesn't feel right, there's a good chance it's not right. Okay, Rebecca, I mean, the question was, what's your the biggest mistake or issue you've had to face? I then follow it up with, what's your biggest triumph? But that could be seen as a triumph as well, because the way it came out.
Yeah, and I know, it was a from an engineering perspective, that's a brilliant, example of a failure and a lessons learned, and how, we obviously did lots of digging into that to understand, well, where in this meticulous design and checking approval process did this happen? Was it an error? Did someone write the wrong colour down, or was it when what stage of the process did that get missed? So you can often, do a great lessons learned into those things, find that root cause. But the end result was a triumph. But I think for me, any success is that collaborative, sort of that team reward moment. And I think the reason people in sales, tolerate some of the harder elements of being in a sales role is for those real highs of those wins and those, having a breakthrough with a client, or getting that order over the line, winning that tender, whatever the win might be. And I think for me, in management and in leadership, those triumphs really do come from that. When you see something click with a team member, or you see that them overcoming that challenge that they really never thought they'd get to, or their team collective wins, celebrating those successes together. And you can pick on individual examples where, someone had no confidence and you got them to over that line. But I think generally for me, those highs of winning are the same when it's your team member.
Yeah. And again, that probably comes back to the character that you should have as a manager. It's about other people's success. If it's all about you, you shouldn't really be in leadership, in my view. But that's a bigger discussion. Okay, Rebecca, listen, we're going to have to leave it there, because the fascinating discussion. Thank you ever so much. Lots and lots that people can take out of this. I'm conscious you've just changed roles as well, so thanks for taking the time out to do this. I know it's very hectic. How's that going, by the way? Because you've changed focus a little bit as well, haven't you?
Yes, so I've joined a contractor in the lighting, generally in the infrastructure sector, but I've taken on their lighting division, as well as some other elements, some asset management skills as well, which link in, and growing a new sort of more digital offering, so sort of smart technology, smart spaces. So yes, shifted into a different part of the industry, and now dealing with construction as our output. So rather than design and consultancy service, we are on the ground installing what those designers and other competitors of my previous team are doing. So very different output. Some different dynamics, different culture, different work patterns. They all start work at 5 a.m. For example.
Oh, goodness.
Because we have lots of restrictions about when we can be on site and things like that.
Right.
So, yes, new area to learn, but from something we were saying earlier, sort of still very same clients in the most part, and the same industry, which is helpful. But dealing with a whole new set of people and team dynamics to try and apply some of my leadership skills and experience too.
Wow. Okay. Well, excellent. I mean, obviously a learning opportunity. I'm sure you're going to be excellent at the job as well, given what you've done so far. Yeah,
and I think I'm obviously responsible for the division, but actually we don't have segregated sort of sales, client roles. Everybody's responsible for servicing their contracts, their clients. But I actually, as part of my director role, am again sort of back into being that client facing and growing, especially the new area in the smart technology space. So I'm sort of back in the sales seat, which I'm loving.
Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. All right. Well, listen, thank you ever so much.
Thanks.
Really insightful, and best of luck with the new role.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Okay, a pleasure. Cheers for now.
Bye.
If you're an aspiring, new, developing, or an experienced sales manager in complex business to business, or you know of someone who is, you may want to go to www.realsalesmanager, that's realsalesmanager, all one word, .com, to learn about our unique blend of training and coaching to help aspiring sales managers to decide if it's right for them and how to go about getting a job, to help new sales managers get as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, and to help developing and experienced sales managers with a personalised program to improve some of their specific skills.